War is remembered in tanks, trenches, and roaring gunfire. But survival in World War II often depended on far smaller things. Items so ordinary that no one would suspect them of being lifelines. A stub of a pencil, a shard of glass, a single match. They weren't listed in manuals, they weren't medals of honor. But for the men and women who carried them, they sometimes meant the difference between coming home or not. Today, we're uncovering 7 forgotten survival items of World War II, objects so small, so overlooked, that you'll never look at them the same way again. Imagine being trapped behind enemy lines, with no radio, no weapon, and no hope of reinforcements. What could possibly save you? For many resistance fighters and captured soldiers, the answer was as simple as a pencil stub. With it, they sketched escape maps on scraps of paper, marked enemy patrol routes on the backs of cigarette packs, and passed hidden notes that looked like nonsense to guards, but were coded instructions to allies. Some pilots even kept tiny silhouettes of enemy aircraft drawn inside matchboxes, training themselves in secret even in captivity. A weapon could kill, but a pencil could lead you to freedom. To most people, a broken mirror is just bad luck. But to a World War II soldier, a shard of glass could become a communication tool more valuable than a rifle. Soldiers used them to flash coded signals across fields and rivers, warning allies of danger or coordinating movements without making a sound. Resistance fighters hid mirror shards inside boots, sending bursts of reflected light to distant comrades. Scouts used them to peer around corners, spotting snipers without exposing themselves. A tiny piece of broken glass turned into a silent voice in the chaos of war. It sounds almost laughably simple: thread and a needle. But in the mud of the trenches and the freezing forests of Europe, this was survival. A ripped boot meant frostbite. A torn backpack meant lost rations. A shredded uniform meant exposure to the elements. Soldiers who knew how to sew weren't mocked. They were respected. Some unraveled socks for thread. Others carved makeshift needles from bones. The difference between life and death could be nothing more than keeping your gear in one piece. At first glance, just another button on a jacket. But hidden inside some of those buttons was a tiny compass, secretly smuggled to downed pilots and captured spies. These disguised tools guided men across forests, rivers, and enemy patrols. Some were slipped into Red Cross care packages, others stitched into escape uniforms. To the Germans, it was just clothing. To an Allied soldier, it was a map home, disguised in plain sight. Every time a soldier buttoned his coat, he might be fastening his way to freedom. Nothing looked more ordinary than a bent wire or a safety pin. Yet these bits of scrap metal held the war effort together, literally. Parachutes fixed in seconds, weapon slings patched on the fly, bandages secured, radios repaired with improvised wiring. Even cooking pots hung over fire pits with nothing but bent wire. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't heroic. But without these makeshift repairs, many soldiers wouldn't have made it through the night. Not every survival item could be carried in the hand. Some were carried in the heart. Folded photographs, often sealed in wax paper, survived trench mud and battlefield rain. A picture of a wife, a child, a family home. These weren't just keepsakes, they were anchors. When men went without food, without sleep, without hope, photographs gave them the strength to keep moving forward. Weapons kept their bodies alive, but photographs kept their souls alive. Finally, perhaps the most unassuming item of all, a waxed match. Dipped in candle wax to waterproof them, these tiny sticks of fire meant survival in the coldest, harshest conditions. One dry match could light a fire to boil water, sterilize wounds, or cook meager rations. In the blackness of war, a single flame became a symbol of hope. For many soldiers, survival wasn't about how many bullets you carried, it was about whether you could strike just one match. When we think of war, we think of weapons, tanks, and planes. But the real survival of World War II often rested in the smallest of things: a pencil stub, a broken mirror, a piece of thread, a photograph. These weren't part of military strategy. They weren't designed in factories. They were improvised, hidden, treasured, and passed from one desperate hand to another. And they remind us of something powerful. Survival doesn't always come from strength. Sometimes it comes from the simplest preparation.